Friday night under the lights, we had scrimmage number 2, and for us, that's kind of the end of fall camp. We still have a little bit of work to do this week, especially certain phases of the game, situational football. We won't jump full go into Toledo prep until a little bit midweek, but we've been working them as well as our first 3 opponents throughout fall camp. So a little different in that routine from a health standpoint. Obviously I have 120 players, but I would say with our travel roster and for specifically our guys that would project either to be in the 2 deep or better, really the only guy that we foresee not being with us in that opening game is Matt Bailey. Unfortunately, he's probably not going to make that game, but everybody else was in the 2 deep or projected to be in the 2 deep should be with us. Have a couple guys coming back off of some concussions, some soft tissue, some routine camp details, but other than that, pretty good. Really excited about that. I think as a coach, right, you always focus on your players, but for me, a big part of this fall camp was being with 4 new coaches totally that had never been with us in the fall camp, and obviously Aaron Henry being a 5th, that he actually transitioned to a coordinator, and on top of that, transitioned to being a dad with 2 twins he just welcomed into the home. So a lot of new roles for guys on our staff, and that was really big to get through fall camp, kind of learn from each other in that regard, so that's been a really good thing. But obviously our roster is where it's at, so Bob, you want to ask the question, or do you want me to just go ahead? Okay. Go ahead, just for formality.
Well, I was going to ask about Johnny Newton. It's going to be first-team All-American.
Okay, yeah.
I want to ask about
That's
that.
not the question I was thinking you were going to go with.
You've not had one before.
But
not had one before.
we'll talk about Johnny, I'm sure, but I thought for sure you're going to give me the quarterback question. You didn't take the bite. All right. So we'll announce today Luke Altmaier will be our starting quarterback going into the Toledo game. We've really had, even last spring through all this fall, I've been very impressed with the quarterback room in general. To have Barry back as a returning coordinator, but also our QB coach, I think has brought a lot of continuity to that room, even though we got new faces. Luke, I sat down and visited with all 3 of our quarterbacks, are really the Luke Altmaier, John Paddock, and Donovan Leary. And to be quite honest, Kirkland Michaud has had a really good spring and summer, but those 3 guys, I think in particular, have proven to me what they can do and what they will do. I told all of them, obviously, Luke with his role as a starting quarterback, I've been very impressed on not just his play on the football field, but kind of how he's handled. I think to walk into this environment, to have a lot of people from the outside world think he's going to be that guy, and to stand in front of his team, to give cadence as a quarterback, to speak in the huddle, but also on the sideline in the locker room. I thought he's just really done a nice job of balancing all that. And so we talked in detail about what that was going to be from this point moving forward. And then obviously John Paddock, I thought he probably played one of his best weeks of football last week, and the competition has definitely made everybody in the room stronger, and very impressed with John, not only, again, with what he's done on the field, but he's, type A mentality, personality, everything, got great leadership qualities, all the things that you ask for in a quarterback, he shines through and has been very, very efficient with our offense, and I think the respect that our guys have on the field for him is big. And then Donovan Leary in particular, a guy that's going into a second fall with us, but last year redshirted, this year going into his redshirt freshman year, has really put together a nice little run, especially this last week. He by far, again, I think on Friday night played his best football that I've seen him play. So as a whole, that room I'm very impressed with, see where it can go. Really every other room on offense, I think Josh and Reggie at the running back position have been more than adequate. We didn't actually play them beyond the first half of the scrimmage on Friday night. Those guys have been really, really good. And then, those group of young running backs have been adequate and been very, very impressive for us. The tight end room, again, really has been impressive. Tip obviously leading that room, but where they're at, offensive line, we've kind of moved and some guys around, still coming up with our best 5 to kind of go through. We're going to get through this week, and we'll have that solidified, but it's really about 7, 8 guys that we're rotating through those positions. Obviously, Isaiah and Julian and Josh probably have it mainstayed and down. But Zai actually rolled his ankle a little bit, so he's been rolling, but he should be back with us on Tuesday to get him back in the lineup. I think will be a positive. Defensively, up front, obviously our cast of characters, Johnny and Keith, have been really good. I think inside, Dixon or Denzel and T-Raw really Sed as well. Sed's had a nice fall camp. Bryce Barnes as well. And the outside linebacker room, really Alec, Seth, and Gabe, those 3 guys. I think we got 2 outside linebackers amongst those 3 guys that all 3 of those guys are kind of starters. And then inside backer has probably been, for me, the best, not surprised, but kind of what you saw come to life. Tariq has very, very good football player, been with us a couple of years, but I think the emergence of Dylan Rozier, Kanena Alaga, James Kreutz, those three guys in particular, on top of Tariq, and then Ryan Mead is playing as good a football from the line of scrimmage and linebacker as we've had. So in the back end, I think Xavier and T. Strain and Taz, those three guys at corner have continued to be very impressive, very hard to compete against. I think from the offensive guys will tell you that, but some of the new guys have been very impressive, from Prince Ford to Sabor, Jaheim Clark. There's been a couple guys that have showed up that maybe not, and Tyson Rooks, right? Those guys have really been impressive in fall camp. And then in the inside, without Matt Bailey, I'd say Demetrius Hill and Clayton Bush at that position have really shined. And then Miles Scott at free safety, and really a couple of new guys that have emerged, have been really impressive. Not just freshmen, but other guys. Clausen has been a guy that's been pretty impressive, and then Mac Resetich is a guy that I think no doubt can help us play this year. I just don't know how much from the line of scrimmage, but it'll help us in a certain capacity, I'm pretty sure. So, and the kickers have been good. Really a punter. The combination of really Breezy and obviously Hugh have done it, but Breezy hasn't punted in a game he kicked last year, but his confidence level in the punting game has been very, very clear. And then obviously Caleb Griffin and David Alano have had a really good camp and are really all be said are competing for that starting nod as well. Been very impressive through fall camp. So that's a little bit of a roster rundown. With that, I'll open it up for some questions.
Coach, what did you see from Luke in the scrimmage on Friday?
Luke
Altmaier.
Really, the more of the same. I think from last February or January when he showed up, getting through spring football, he's gotten better every day. But I think his presence, his demeanor, his ability to execute our offense, his consistency. We put him on a lot of pressure. We try to build as much pressure as we can in the game situations that we can without actually rushing the game. But I would say that what he did is showed consistency, but not that the other guys didn't. The other guys have been equally consistent as well.
What do you want to see from him next now that he's got the job?
Yeah, I think as a quarterback, he gets a lot of attention, right? I always tell quarterbacks when we recruit them, and especially to their parents, right? Their quarterbacks share a thing that as head coaches, when things go well, they get a lot of credit, and when things don't go well, they get a lot of blame. And, I get paid a lot of money to take that, and I'll do that. But as a quarterback, all we're asking him to do is be better today than he was yesterday, right? And just stay on that progression. I think as he walked into our building, and I don't want to speak for him on his behalf, I know he'll talk to you guys tomorrow. One of the things that's been very impressive to me is I don't really care about what happened before he got here, but I have a feeling that how things were run at Ole Miss, and I love Lane. Lane's a friend of mine, but they're probably completely different than what we do here. And I think that even last year with Tommy, I thought it was really cool for me to grow as a head coach with him and have him grow with us. Obviously, he's doing some really good things at that next opportunity. So I think he's just kind of sat back and processed it, and I think he takes that to its highest level. As he just wants to get better today than he was yesterday.
Not just quarterback position, but anywhere where there was a position battle. How much did you go off of performances in scrimmage to determine?
I think big, especially at that point, it's the most game-like we can make it, right? So football awareness, like the first scrimmage was a lot of early down. There was some move the ball, but this last scrimmage on Friday night was all move the ball. We just put the ball all over the place. We had it, starting off after a touchback. We had it at midfield. We had it in the red area. We had it move the football, sudden change. So it really put them in all those. And in particular, guys that are signal callers, so, quarterbacks on offense, linebackers and safeties on defense, those guys have got to be aware of the moment, and that was big.
Next step for Matt Bailey in terms of his timeline?
He actually started running, just coming back off of his injury. I think he has a follow-up. I know it's a follow-up on the Monday after the Toledo game. So at that point will be a big, can we move forward? I think the earliest we could project in the back would be the Penn State game. Matt's got, not only has he played good football, he's got a lot of really good football in front of him. And so I've really been trying to be balanced. I think our doctors have done an unbelievable job just kind of staying on top of this one and guiding it and getting us to the point where it can be.
Sorry for shanking the earlier question, but back to Johnny. He's just named first team All-American preseason, which is a first here. What's it mean to you? And when you first saw him, did you think, this guy's going to be that guy? Or?
Yeah, in particular with Johnny, I say this all the time. One of the things the NFL drives you to do is you have what's called one-liners. So I would evaluate you guys, right, as sports reporters, I would give a one-liner. I'm not going to share them with you, right? But they would give a brief description to try and give as much information in a short amount of time as possible. And so you give a lot of comparisons, right? So when I first got here with Johnny, literally during that winter, I'd see him move. I saw the explosion, but when I saw him practice in spring, I remember sitting myself, I was talking to an NFL D-line coach who I'd worked with the Patriots. We had a guy by the name of Malcolm Brown who was a 32nd pick out of the University of Texas. And he was a first-round kid, obviously 32nd pick. But he was very explosive, very powerful, wasn't overly long, but had really good explosiveness, extremely intelligent, good athlete. And that's Johnny in a nutshell. Johnny is extremely powerful. I think that his early down rush value is something, if you were scouting us, you would be like, okay, this guy is disruptive on early downs in many different ways. Former high school running back that he'll remind you of all the time, right? So he really can run and cover a lot of grass for a big guy. I think he probably jumps out to people when they watch that on film. And then really just his football IQ, his intelligence. Once you tell Johnny, and to be quite honest, Keith, I think the reason both those guys have really, really good football IQ and awareness, and sometimes that doesn't coincide with great players, right? Like sometimes it's just because of ability, but Johnny has the intelligence and the athleticism that let him go at a different level. I didn't know it was our first ever. I know Bret probably shared that with me, but you know, on Saturday after the scrimmage, we had watched the film and put it in its entirety, you know, the review of that, and I was kind of letting them go Saturday, and they had some time Saturday and Sunday to be by themselves away from us. We had some voluntary things we wanted to come in for, and obviously guys with rehab, but I knew they had classes to start today, so we're not going to meet with them until tonight. So they had a little bit of time there, and I wanted them to understand, you know, what's behind us is behind us, and what's in front of us is determined by us. And one of the things I did is I showed slides of it's really 8 guys that are up for 15 national awards, right? And I think about when I first came here, my first year, I don't know if we had any watch list guys or anything, right? And I'm not saying that they're just bringing out a point, right? Like last year we had Chase Brown up for the Doak, right? And he'd gained 1,000 yards a year before. Well, this year we got 2 guys that are up for the Doak Walker, right? And I don't think they had 1,000 yards between the 2 of them, right? Added together. So the respect of what we do has brought attention to our room. But on the same account, Johnny is getting a lot of attention, and Keith, because of what they've done. And it's kind of a neat place in our program to have 15 guys up for national awards, but there's no preseason watch list that guarantees you any victories, right? But our guys are hearing that for the first time. You're going to ask them questions, right? I love the social media post and brag on our guys, but we were getting so many, I didn't want to leave one out. There was one time last year where somebody was nominated for a national award, and I had to bring him in for a little come to Jesus meeting about other issues, right? And he literally said, well, you know, you didn't retweet my watch list. And I'm like, are you serious, right? Like, but kids pay attention to that, right? And I think it's a very good football 101 for me as a head coach to grasp, like, what we say and what we do as a coach directly affects the responses of our players. But also, they're out in the community now, and they're in classrooms. They're getting taught by teachers. They're in the community with fans. And if they hear that they're going to be good, they begin to think they're going to be good, and sometimes that can be a detriment as well.
You have pegged Getsky for this role 2 years ago when he was a freshman, and just can you talk about his rise as he's kind of grown as a player?
You know, it's a great question. I would say probably one of the most surprising, but also not surprising, because once you see him work, is Getsky's growth. Like, he just literally kind of, you know. I don't know if anybody's seen the movie Full Metal Jacket, right? But Private Pile, right? Like, went through this metamorphosis. I don't want to turn it into that, right? But like there's this change, like he's different, right? And I think Josh, as soon as he got in the building, you could see he's extremely dedicated. He's also diabetic, right? So he has that he has to control. And once I began to see him control that the way he did, I mean, he came to me the day, he's like, Coach, I got to go get a regular Gatorade, right? He didn't want the sugar-free one. He needed and he knows his body like that, right? Like, he literally knows what he takes before, during, and after. And I give our staff a lot of credit for helping guide him, but he does that on his own 24/7. And when you have that focus as a big man, it's been pretty impressive to watch him continue to be that. When Zai went down, we popped him out to right tackle the other day, and he was equally efficient, right? So, again, just another high football IQ. I give Tony Pashos, right? Like, Tony played here back in the day. Tony kind of took him under a mentoring role and took a lot of pride in it, and Josh responded in that way as well. So it's kind of fun once we get around some of our former players how much they can affect our program as well.
Obviously, Luke, it's your starter, but how's that backup competition shaping up there?
You know, without a doubt, I think if we had to play a game tomorrow, John would be the guy, and I shared that with him and with Donovan. A couple weeks ago, you guys interviewed them, and whether you believe it or not, I usually read some of the commentary, and Bret does a great job of giving me quotes. And the way both Donovan, John, and Luke talked about the competition in the room, but also about the way they talk to each other, it's been uncanny for me to watch that formulate on the sidelines. Like they're all kind of three different dudes, right? And all of them kind of gravitate off of each other and compete off one another and ask questions. It's really been a healthy room.
How fluid might things be in the secondary for the opener? Do you want to have your guys figured out, or are we going to play several and kind of?
I think there'll be several roll through, but you know, in the secondary, I would say there'll be some mainstays. Like I would say, like Xavier Scott and Taz really have shown like those guys are pretty solid players. I think if they're not in the game, it would be because we're either getting them a blow or we have something strategically planned to give them a little bit of rest. But those two guys, now Xavier can play multiple positions, but those two kind of stand out. I would say very much Miles Scott has continued to put himself in a position of like, hey, this is a pretty impressive player. He hadn't played a lot of defensive back football, but he's played a lot in practice, and obviously last spring to this fall. And then really between Demetrius Hill and Clayton Bush, even though they haven't played a lot of football for us, they played a lot of football, and those two guys I think will be pretty fluid at that safety position.
2 years ago, you talked about Josh McCray around this time of the year, like, hey, I thought this guy would be good, but
Yeah.
you've got to see this guy. Last year you spoke of Gabe Akas the same way.
Yeah.
Like, he's all that we thought we were recruiting and more. Are there any freshmen in this class that, you know, end of camp, beginning of this, that you're like, wow, now that we've got him on the field, this is a player for
Yeah,
us.
again, I appreciate the question. One of the things that I have on our building, right, door walking in, door walking out, one of our things is speak for yourself, right? So as a head coach, I don't want to give an inclination if somebody's going to be something that they're not, but I would say, you know, some young guys that have jumped out on the offense side of the ball, without a doubt, guys that we focused early on in recruiting, Caden Fagan. Like, I don't know if we targeted a young man as much as we did when I first got here, just the way he needed to be recruited. We beat out literally everybody in the Big Ten and several private schools as well, right, that wanted his talents. Just a great fit into our program in a many different capacity. But since he's been here and now, I would say this fall, he's changed a lot. I know you guys saw him in the spring, saw him a little bit this fall, but like I think everybody's excited to watch him run on our football team. Like when our players are excited to watch someone play, that tells me what we're getting, right? An easy one on offense, Malik Elzy. Malik is a very talented. It's kind of funny. Caden wears 3, Malik wears 2, and we were going out to our first practice, and I was on the defensive end way down here, and they were starting to catch kicks, right? And I saw a big guy get up and catch a kick and take off running. And I'm like, wow, we got Caden back there catching kicks. I didn't know he did that, right? Like, and I get up and I'm standing next to Caden, and I'm like, well, who? And I turned around and it was Malik Elzy in 2, right? And Malik is a big, strong. Now he's not as big as Caden, but from a distance, like he jumps out without a doubt. On the defensive side of the ball, although they're not new but they're new transfers, I would say Denzel Daxon, Clayton Bush, and Demetrius Hill, those 3 guys, I think are going to play a lot of football for us, and I like what they bring to the table. And then really from the outside linebacker room and inside linebacker room, some of those young guys, Dylan Rosiak, I think is going to really make a big jump and play a lot of good football for us. Alec Bryant probably on the edge. Seth, Gabe, and Alec have had a really good fall camp.
If I can follow that up with
Yeah.
Daxon.
You know, one more after Robert.
That's an interesting recruitment because it's, you know, somebody from Ohio, kind of unknown, you know. That's not a guy that is in the portal. People are like, oh, everybody going off that 5-star from Texas or whatever.
Right.
Well, how do you identify a guy like Daxon and say, you know,
Yeah.
that's a nose for us?
Yeah, that's Pat Embleton and Jay Kaiser really kind of run our portal business, right? Jay in particular. And I think Denzel, I first got a text on him like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night when he got in the portal and looked at him. Then you find his history. He's actually from the Bahamas. Then I believe he went to Carroll City, if I'm not mistaken, Miami, Carroll City. He was originally signed with the Miami Hurricanes, but because of the whole Bahamian education transferring, and he was short on some credits, not because of ability, just really because he couldn't make the NCAA standards. So that's how he ended up at Miami, Ohio, and then was a graduate. I saw his film, and I'm like, man, this guy's powerful, explosive, you know, and I thought we could really help him physically get better. And then that first practice, like, I know he wanted to like quit, right? But like or stop working out, and he just kept pushing himself through, kept encouraging him, and to see where he's at now, he's literally transformed in a 6-month window into something that's pretty impressive. So, you know, the neat thing about the portal, the recruiting stories are unique before we get them, but once we get them, portal kids want to go to where they're going to get an opportunity. And then I think because we actually are one of the fewest teams that have guys leaving our program, once they got here and saw our guys talk about our program in a certain way, I think that's what helps us get them.
You said you did some shuffling on the offensive line. Can you share some specifics? Any late developments?
Yeah. So like last week when Zai wasn't in there, we put Geske out at tackle, and Jordan Slaughter obviously is a right guard. We've been rolling through right guard. At the center position, we've repped not only Barlev in there, but also Jordan Slaughter's been getting reps in there as well. You know, Brandon Henderson, I think, is another freshman that's going to play for us and see where he's at. So, you know, then some Joey Okla to Barlev that I mentioned, Hunter Whiteneck, those guys rolling through there. I can go one more. Yeah. I'll go 2.
How fluid is the return personnel situation?
Punt returner and kick returner? Well, I think, you know, what Isaiah has been impressive to me during fall camp is not only at wide receiver play, but in the return game. I think he's taken another step. Isaiah's had a very impressive camp. Very excited to see where he gets and where he goes. As a kick returner, we have a host of couple guys. I think between Pat Bryant back there, Aiden Lawfrey's been very impressive as a running back and as a returner. So, but there's also some other guys, Taz, T-Strain, Reggie Love, Josh McCray. They've all kind of been back there, and we'll make a decision game week to see who we put there to begin with. Go ahead.
Last year, that the star of that nickel position was more grouped in with the safeties.
Yeah.
Has that changed where it's maybe more of a cornerback?
It's a good question. So I would say that was more because of Quan. I think that star position, sometimes it comes out of the safety room, sometimes it comes out of the corner room. Xavier's probably our best star right now, so in that case, it'd be coming out of the corner. But Xavier Scott literally could play all 5 positions for us. He's a very talented player. It was just so awesome yesterday. A lot of times I don't see graphics till they're out, right? And I saw that graphic of 14 days out, and I saw Xavier Scott, and I put that up in a team room, and the way our team responded, you could see the love that Xavier has. And I know on the coaching staff we love him, but the respect he has from the room. So, but I'd say our next nickel probably comes from the safety room, right? So it's kind of Aaron and Antonio meet all together, right, at a lot of times and kind of cross over. Aaron coached our corners last year, right? So, but he did work with Spoon in certain regards, so it's really been kind of fluid. Thank you. Appreciate it.